talking about Stripe, building your own flows.
You know, you're recording it right now?
So I started my world in e-commerce, so I love it. I think by far one of the best companies in this world that revolutionized everything was Stripe when it first came out.
Yeah, Stripe has been doing some really interesting things when it comes to payments. I think prior to, more recently, like it was just completely software-based, and now they have like hardware devices.
Yes.
And I think if you remember earlier this year, Apple announced like Tap to Pay, and that's being powered by Stripe too. So there's a lot of interesting. Yeah, the Tap to Pay stuff for your iPhone is being powered by Stripe.
Oh my God.
So there's a lot of interesting things that are happening, like in that. How can I make it easier to just like accept payments? You know what I mean, inside of your application. So yeah, so it'll be some cool stuff. We're just gonna talk about the easy stuff today.
Love it.
But we could always come back and dive into some more like complex use cases.
That's it.
Cool. So should I go? Should I get
to
it?
Go. It's all you.
All right. So good night, everybody. My name's Cecil. If you guys don't know me, I'm a developer advocate at Stripe. Prior to joining Stripe, because I like to call myself Stripe fresh. Like I just got here in November. So prior to that, I was at Microsoft. I was a developer advocate there for about 4.5 years, and I've been local in South Florida for probably longer than I could tell, since about 2008. Doing software development, doing .NET, mainly .NET web APIs and things of that nature, and working in the cloud, working for just various companies and different industries and things of that nature. So that's a little bit about me. Also, if folks are wondering where I'm originally from, so I from this little tiny island called Antigua. I don't know if you ever heard about Antigua before, but it's an island in the Caribbean. They play a lot of cricket. That's right. 108 square miles, 365 beaches. Beautiful place to go vacation if you ever decide to go down there.
Oh my God!
And
you switched accents.
I did.
That was amazing. I've never heard your accent.
It switches. There's a toggle. It's like feature flags. Like I have a feature flag that like turns on and turns off. But yeah, so grew up and born and raised in the Caribbean, and now I live in South Florida. I don't go to this place in South Florida as much, but you kind of get the point.
.com?
Yes, thank you.
Oh, nice.
I need to put that in. All right, so we're going to talk about Stripe, right? And my main goal tonight is to be able to have you understand how easy it is that you can integrate payment processing inside of your application. I'm going to be doing .NET, as you can imagine. This is a .NET user group. But nothing I'm showing you is .NET specific, right? Stripe itself supports a variety of different programming languages. .NET, obviously, but then there's Go, Java, Python, PHP, Ruby, JavaScript, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right? One of the cool things to know about Stripe, it's available in tons of different countries. We support a lot of different payment methods. So, credit cards are probably the most common ones that you've heard about, but we also support Ach Debit. We support the free payment methods. Have you ever heard about like the paid, what's it called? Buy now, pay later model with things like Klarna, where you could like pay with installments. We can do all these different types of things using Stripe. So again, I want to show you pretty much just like how easy it is that you can start using some of this stuff inside of your applications today. Really cool fact, like folks always want to know like, oh, who are your customers? Who uses you? Well, here you go. Here's a list of some of the folks that make use of Stripe today in one or more different ways. Because again, like Stripe is more than just, hey, give me some information on the internet and I collect money. But we have a lot of different ways that interaction can happen. So for instance, you see here like Amazon, like you can think about Amazon and Shopify, all these places where you type in your credit card number and you check out a thing or buy something. You know what I mean? Like those, a lot of those services are integrated with Stripe. You see Facebook, DoorDash, GitHub. If you're familiar with like the sponsorship feature side of GitHub, a lot of that stuff uses Stripe. Wayfair, Peloton, some of these folks that are doing subscription-based payments where they're charging you every month versus like one-time payments versus like I have a marketplace. When you think about things like Lyft, right? Like Lyft is more like a marketplace where I have a collection of riders, and now you pay Lyft, and then Lyft pays the riders, right? You're not directly paying the riders, right? There's kind of like a marketplace where the payment is jumping between different places, and Lyft is kind of just like the portal where you kind of enter into that marketplace. So that kind of makes sense. So again, just some different folks and some different ways that they're using Stripe today. Now, let's talk about the payment options, right? So we think about like the way that we've traditionally thought about money, right? Particularly now that we're kind of coming out of the pandemic. A lot of the times, I'm very used to like growing up and walking around with pennies in my pocket and cash, And I can tell you how many times that I've lost, like, the wad of cash that's in my pocket, it's fallen out. I had it in an envelope, and I was supposed to go pay a bill, and it dropped, and when I got home, I was in trouble because I lost all the money, right? Like we came from that to now we're at the point where, you know, we have all these supercomputers in our pockets or even on our watches that we can really just walk by and, like, touch a thing, and then it'll just accept the payment. It'll charge our card, you know, it'll get verified, it'll get validated, and it's very much of a touchless experience, right? Like, I don't have to pull out a card, I don't have to pull out cash, I don't have to sit and calculate change in my head, right? Like, that is where we are today when we think about how payments have evolved over this time. And like I mentioned before, like, there's some different ways of paying as well, right? We talk about companies like Klarna, like Afterpay, where now it's like, okay, I can buy a thing from you, and it's almost like, I don't want to say it's like layaway, but it's almost like, hey, I can pay you in installments for whatever the case is, versus like, oh, I have to have all the money up front now, right? But not only is it possible for us to do these things just in real life, but we can add that to our software too, right? And so the whole goal of Stripe is being able to add some of these capabilities to some of the applications you're building today, and hopefully you'll see, like, you know, how easy that is. Now, a couple things I want to talk to you about first. So let's talk about, like, credit cards. So now, credit cards are good. Credit cards are okay, but, like, credit cards only make up about 30% of the customers that are actually spending money, right? So, like, what happens to that other percentage, right? There's a larger percentage of folks that aren't actually just using credit cards. You know what I mean?
In the U.S.
Across the world.
Oh.
Across the world. Across the world. And I'll show you some more numbers as we go, right? If you look, particularly now since the pandemic, like 27% more people are using, like, that buy now, pay later type model, like I was mentioning to you about. And then now as well, like, again, we spoke about, like, Apple Pay, Google Pay, like, those are enabling people to pay much faster than they would have before. So again, if you think about global commerce, I'm sorry, this is the right number. Global commerce, credit cards only drive 40%. That means that there's 60% of customers, the 60% of payments that are not going through credit cards. So now I'm very sure as a company, you probably want to service these people as well, right? You don't want to throw away 60% of the market. You want to be able to work with these folks in different countries, with different locales, with different ways of accepting and receiving money, right? Like, we want to be able to have these folks inside of our business. So one of the great things about Stripe is that it's always been very developer focused, right? Like, what is the best developer experience that we can have, right? How can we make it easy for you as a developer to be able to add these capabilities to our product? Right? And as you can see here, it says a great API product stays out of the way of the developer for as long as possible, right? We just want you to be able to focus on doing the things you like to do and not really have to fumble too much around with the code and with all these other setups and things of that nature. But when it's time for you to do that, then it shouldn't be too hard for you to start plugging these things inside of your ecosystem. Now, if you think about Stripe, like, when it first was, you know, came into the world, like, years ago, it had a mantra, and I think it used to say, you know, start accepting payments with, like, 7 lines of code. And I think back then it was like, you know, 7 lines of PHP that you literally copied and pasted from the website into your application. And there you go, like, all the WordPress developers in the world can now start accepting payments. That's essentially how it started, right? And essentially it was just making requests back to the main, you know, Stripe application and having you able to, like, start processing payments in a very easy and, like, meaningful way. So now let's imagine, like, you have your business now. You need to start thinking about, like, what does your payment workflow look like? Like, what does that even mean? So I mentioned earlier today, like, just when we were just talking before, like, there's a few ways that you can kind of think about it. You can say, okay, I need to be able to do recurring payments. Right, so that means that I have a subscription service, like, I don't know, like Netflix or Hulu, or maybe you have an Audible account, right? And every month, every so often, it's going to charge you, like, some fixed amount of money for your service, right? You also have the ability to do things like metered billing. You know, it's almost like pay per use. If you think about things like, hey, I'm going to use storage, or if you think about, like, I have my own API, and I'm going to say, hey, for the first 10,000 requests, it's free, but after that, I'm going to start charging you. And then after you pass 20,000, there's a certain fee. And then after you pass 30,000, there's a certain fee, right? It's called pay per use. So based on the rate of usage within a particular period of time, I'm going to charge you a different rate, right? Another thing we might want to do is just, like, simple one-time payments, right? Simple, easy, hey, this is what this costs. Here are the list of products that you're going to get. I'm going to pay you one time, and then that's it, right? But these are all 3 very distinct ways of accepting money in your application. And you have to think about, well, for the type of work that I'm doing, what's the best way for me to approach that problem? What's the type of system that I want to have in place to be able to do that? Now, when we think about payment workflows from the back end of it, this is kind of what it looks like, right? So you have a card holder or, the payer, and then essentially you're going to go to the merchant, right? The person that you're actually getting that service from. And let's say, I don't know, let's for the sake of this conversation say that we're talking about a pharmacy, right? So you go to the pharmacy, you swipe your card or, your HSA card or whatever the case is. And now what's going to happen is that, like, the little terminal that you're actually swiping into, it's going to go and it's going to go back into a payment gateway. Now, payment gateway is going to go back down into the issuing bank, and it's going to do some work. It's going to verify you. It's going to make sure you put in the right PIN code. It's going to make sure that you put in the right zip code and all these types of things. And it's going to come back and it's going to say, okay, I'm accepting this payment or not, right? Well, like, from our side as consumers, like, we don't really see a lot of this stuff. And to be honest with you, it kind of gets a little bit more complicated as we start to add more elements into that workflow. So have you ever gone to a store where instead of actually going to the cashier, what you've actually done is there's a person walking around with, like, a phone in their hand or a terminal in their hand, and they, like, check you out right there on the spot. Like, you don't have to walk somewhere and go online. They just, like, swipe a card or they push a button or whatever. You sign into your account, and they just charge you. Right? Like, so we have those abilities to use things like those point-of-sale terminals, phones, tablets, and then now if you've seen, like, Amazon has this thing where you walk into the store and you pick the thing up and you walk out, and it uses AI and facial recognition and all these cool things to just charge you. And you've never reached into your pocket, you've never signed in for anything. You've just, like, touched the product, bye, I'm leaving, and you walk out, and you're like, oh, Cecil took up, like, the watermelon water, SKU number, blah, 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 and then now I go into my Amazon account and I see, like, the charges and all of these type of things, right? Like, so this is the type of world that we're going into. We started to think about, like, payments and how we want to accept payments, and then also what are the ways that we want to integrate that inside of our application. So now let's think about, like, when we're documenting our actual payment workflow, like, here's some of the things that you really need to think about, right? So things like, for instance, like, how is that data stored, right? If you think about, like, hey, I have a web form, right? First name, last name, address, zip code, blah, 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 blah. Where do I store that information? Am I allowed to store that information? Have you ever heard about, like, Pci Compliance and Pci DSS and some of these types of regulatory systems? Am I actually allowed to store that information? Can I store it in my database? Can I just keep it in memory and just funnel it along?
Does my boss want me to keep it?
Does my boss want me to keep it?
You know.
What happens when we have to get audited? Do I have to have that information logged? Like, who's responsible when bad things happen? Right? Like, we have to think about all these things as you're trying to add this workflow into your system.
Even then, you have to think about the fact that you have to keep track of those.
So kind of going a little bit deeper than I wanted to. So with Pci Compliance, you have to get certified to be Pci compliant. So, like, banks, for instance, are Pci compliant, banks, insurance companies, like, people that move a lot of money are Pci compliant. They have to be by default. And you can be Pci compliant as well. But now your systems, your business, your software has to, meet certain standards to be able to have that compliance, right? And so this is kind of part of where Stripe makes it a little bit easier for you, because with some of the services that we provide, this information never touches your server. You can see it, it's in your web browser, but in terms of your backend application, in terms of, like, the mobile storage on your phone or whatever it is that it's talking to in the cloud, it never touches that. And so because of that alone, that means that you're going to use the Pci Compliance certification of Stripe instead of yours. Right? So no, you don't have to worry about it. It's kind of like the whole premise of the cloud, right? Like, it's someone else's computer, right? In this case, it's someone else's compliance. Like, let us worry about it, and you don't have to. And then, you can continue, maintaining your product database, maintaining your customer database, doing everything else that you're used to be doing in your work, in your marketplace or in your store or whatever the case is. But that one part, when we're like, okay, it's time to get paid now it becomes a little bit sensitive, right? And now we don't want to be, putting ourselves in too much risk by having to deal with that information.
We need a pass. Right?
Payment as a service, right? So hence, now we have things like Stripe and PayPal and Braintree and all these other services that kind of exist to kind of help us solve that problem. Again, and now thinking about some of the other things that we mentioned down the line, right? Like, what are the different payment workflows you want to have? Maybe you want to have a mixture of one-time payment and also subscriptions. Maybe you want to have a mixture of marketplaces and subscriptions. Maybe you want to have just one or a multitude of them, right? Like, what are some of the different ways that you want your particular business to function? And again, who's going to be responsible? Who's going to be, let's say you have to issue a refund. Who's going to issue the refund? Is it going to be you or the person providing the service, right? How do I issue refunds for recurring services versus one-time payments? Who's keeping the receipts? Who's responsible for looking at all of this information, right? Like, these are all things that we have to think about. And Stripe does make some of it easier, but you still have to pay attention to it, right? It's almost like we're not going to write the code for you, but you can write a little bit less code, but you still have to write some code, if that makes sense. All right, so one of the products that I want to show you today that we're really going to focus on is Stripe Checkout. Now, there's a couple of different ones that we have. Again, there's just raw payments. We have something called Atlas for setting up business from scratch. We have identity things and all kinds of stuff. But today we're going to focus on talking about Stripe Checkout. Because for me, I think, particularly for .NET developers or any developer at all, to be honest with you, this is probably the easiest way for you to get started accepting payments inside of your application. And I'm going to show you why in a second. So this is kind of what Stripe Checkout looks like on the left side. So on the left side, what you're looking at is a Stripe-hosted customized payment page. So that means that on the left side, you can customize it with the images of your products or the list of your products. You have the total. You're going to have the logo or whatever for your company that represents your company. And then also, how do you want to collect payments? So as you can see here, we could do Google Pay or we could do Apple Pay. There's a credit card form here, but we could also take things like bank accounts and SEPA payments and some of these other payment methods that are available in other countries outside of the U.S. Right? The cool thing about using Stripe Checkout is that it understands the locale, like it understands the context of the machine. And I'll show you what that means in a second. But if it says, hey, you're in Europe, I'm going to show you the European payment methods that your product supports. Obviously, you have to support it. But if you said, yes, I'm going to support this payment method, it'll look and see, hey, okay, I'm in this country. I'm going to show you the payment methods available for this country. Just like if I was saying, hey, I only want to accept payments from the U.S., you can tailor it to say, hey, if someone comes here from some place that is not within my zone of coverage, then I'm going to not accept payment from those places. Like, these are some of the things that are just automatically built in the Stripe Checkout. You don't have to think about it. It just kind of works, and I think it's great. Now, on the right side, what you're looking at, I'm going to move over because I think this is behind my head. But this is the payment element. Now, with the payment element, the difference between the payment elements and Stripe is that this is almost like a web component, right? So you drag or you include a web component inside of your JavaScript application, right? You interact with JavaScript, vanilla JavaScript, but you could use React or Angular or whatever you feel like. But a vanilla JavaScript component, and you can now specify like what exactly you want to do with these different payment elements. Now, there's more than one type of payment element. There's a card element, there's an address element, there's a full payment form where it has almost everything on it. You can kind of decide, well, how exactly it is that I want to be able to customize the look and feel of that form. This way, you're going to have ultimate control over like that user experience. This way, you're going to have a Stripe-hosted form, right? This is going to be on a stripe.com URL. This one's going to be on yourwebsite.com, right? The difference is that this is going to be an element on your page versus this is an entire page that we're hosting on Stripe. Again, just depending on the type of experience you want to have, you can pick and choose between those different options. Right. So how do you integrate Stripe Checkout into your app? I'll show you what this looks like in a second, but to be honest with you, all you need to do is create like what we call like a checkout session. Right? A checkout session is pretty much just like, hey, I'm intending to make a payment, right? And these are the things that I'm intending to charge. So if you kind of think about the workflow whenever you go to like a shopping cart or something like that, I go and I click, add to my cart. I have 6 things into my cart. And now whenever I hit that checkout button, and you're going through that workflow of let's verify, like these are the things you want, and this is what the price is, and this is what the taxes are, and this is the shipping address, and so on and so forth. At that point is when you create what's called a checkout session. And that checkout session is going to have all that information in it. And now after we create the checkout session itself is going to have a very unique URL. There's a unique URL per session you create. So if you create 10 session objects in the backend, you're going to have 10 unique URLs. That's going to take you to a page that's going to allow you to be able to accept the payment. But once you create that session in the backend, like I'm saying, from your web application or, we do have mobile components as well, you're going to make sure that that customer is sent to that page where they can fill out this information, again, in your URL, in your address bar, you're going to see it's going to say checkout.stripe.com/bunch of gibberish at the end, right? And you'll be able to fulfill your payment, and it's going to redirect you back into your application where you can continue going through whatever workflow you want to go through. And so this is pretty much what the workflow for that kind of looks like, right? Like, so again, customer clicks the payment button. Like I'm saying, we're going to go back to the backend, and we're going to create that checkout session. We're going to return that one-time URL. We're going to redirect the user for payment. They enter their payment information, and if it's successful, you can specify what's called like a success URL, or if it's not successful, and not successful means like, oh, I don't want to pay for this anymore, or I want to cancel this payment, right? There's another URL called the cancel URL. We'll send you there instead, right? So again, like you have full ability to be able to customize not only what happens and what it looks like, but when it's finished, like where does the user get sent back to? Like what is the experience that you want them to have? So let's do this. I'm going to come out to the slides real quick. We're going to look at a quick demo and see like what this actually looks like. Now, if I remember where my stuff is. All right. So if you've never seen the Stripe dashboard before, this is essentially what it looks like. You can go to stripe.com and you could create an account. You don't have to do anything to create an account. You don't have to put in a credit card if you don't want to pay an account. You know, as you can see, this at the top says activate payments. This is what I like to call like an unactivated account. So it's not working with any real data. This is not a real customer. This is not, you know, real data or anything like that. Like if you actually use this, you can't use it. This is mine. But like if you had yours, you know, you wouldn't actually be processing real payments. But what I'll show you, what I have in here is if I head over to products, excuse me, you can see that I have a few different products in here. And these products are more like events. So you imagine like I have a ticketing website and I'm, you know, selling tickets like the next conference or hackathon or party or whatever the case is, right? And I have different, you know, different images for them. There's a lot of metadata that's attached with these products, so I can have different prices for them. Somewhere in here there should be some images. Where are my images? There should be images for these things somewhere in here. And again, I have different prices for this. So as you can see here, this one's $175 US. Okay, so that's all that's important in here for now. Let's head over to Visual Studio Code. Oh, this is not Visual Studio. This is Writer. I'm using Writer today. No. All right, so I'm using Writer today because it's free. I don't have to pay for it. I'm using Writer. And I'm going to go ahead and run this, and we'll see what it looks like. To be honest with you, I just installed this last night. So if it doesn't work, we'll figure it out together. All right, so this is what the website looks like. Okay, so those products that you saw me showing you inside of my Stripe dashboard, these are the products that are showing here. Now, as you can see, there's a lot of filler data, but the only thing that is really important is that you can see I can have these different images, like this different metadata and these names and all this stuff is coming from our Stripe products. All right, now this is the main page for the thing. Again, I have different prices, I have the location, and if I want to actually buy this thing, if I want to actually go to this event, I'm going to go ahead and click on tickets. And what it's going to do, like I mentioned before, it's going to redirect me over to checkout.stripe.com. Right? Does this work? Does this Zoom work? Yes. Yes. There you go. Right. So you see it says checkout.stripe.com. Right. So that's exactly where this page is hosted. And now notice I have the option of checking out with Google Pay. I can have my email, my address information, credit card information, you know, blah blah blah, so on and so forth. So let's go ahead and fill this out and see what happens. Now I'm going to say my email is going to be don't email me because I don't like emails. My address, I'm just going to put in Microsoft here because, you know, why not? Is it not working? Oh, it's not working. So usually what happens here is that it auto-completes.
What's your browser?
I'm guessing that's fine. I'm guessing what you call it? Oh, here it is. Yeah, it usually auto-completes. It's not doing that today, but that's fine. So let's do this. I'm going to put in this address. I'm going to say one Microsoft way, right? And this is going to be in Seattle 33322. Sure. I'm just going to put in a fake address. Let's see what happens. Right? The phone number. And now what I'm going to do is put in what's called, we have like these test credit card numbers that you could use inside of Stripe. So if you want to try out different workflows, you can kind of test them out with our different cards. So we'll have cards that will accept the payments, will fail the payments, will be credit card stolen. Like, we'll have all these different types of events that will fire off, and you'll see that. So one of the famous ones that a lot of folks in the payment industry use for some reason is 42, 42, 42, 42, 42, 42. And this is always going to return successfully. So if I go ahead and I process this really quickly, this should be a successful payment. And notice now at the top it says /success, right? So it's now sent me to my success URL. And then you say, well, email your receipt, be specified during checkout, right? Okay. Now, let's go back and take a look again at how these events are working. So if I click on another one, actually what I want to do is this. I'm going to open this in a different browser. Now, I never use Safari, but, it's good for testing, right? It's always good to test different. So I'm going to open this in Safari. And I am going to go to this page, right? Do I want to make Safari my default browser? No, not really. But what we are going to do is I'm going to open this page in Safari, right? Should I click on the same thing? I don't think it matters. There we go. So we're going to click on the same product. And I want you to see how the experience is different. So I'm going to click on this one. I'm going to click on both of them because they take a second to load. And notice how this one is showing me Google Pay. What's this one showing me? It's showing me Apple Pay. Why do you think it's showing me Apple Pay on this browser, but Google Pay in the other browser? Well, this is a Google browser, right? And this is an Apple browser, right? So again, it's very context aware. It knows the browsers you're using because obviously you could look at user agents and things of that nature. It knows the locale that you're in. We're in the United States, so it knows that those types of things. And it's going to customize the experience based on whatever your users are. I didn't have to write any code for this. Not for the customization part anyway. The only thing I had to do was create that checkout session in the backend. I'll show you what that looks like. But in terms of it being aware of what browser it's using, and what language we're using, and all that type of stuff, like I don't do any of that. Right? And again, like I mentioned before, if you look at the URL, it says checkout.stripe.com. Again, anytime that payment information goes in here, it doesn't touch my server. I'm not responsible. I know nothing about it. All I know is, was the payment successful or not? Was there money in the account or not? Yes or no. Let me know what happened. And then we can kind of go forward and keep working with our products. Okay. All right. I'm going to stop this really quick so we understand how that works. I'm going to come back and show you a little bit of the code as to what this kind of looks like. Now, again, this is a .NET app. It has a little bit of Blazor. It has some web API in the back end. I still like controllers. I'm not into this minimal API stuff. That's just me personally. But, everyone has their opinion about how the world works. Let's take a look and see how you can start using the Stripe API to do something. Now, the first thing I want to show you is whenever that page loads the first time, I'm going to go into my Stripe dashboard, and I'm going to pull that product information out. So as you can see here, there's this thing called the price service. So essentially, I'm just saying, hey, give me the prices for all of these different events that are there. Right? I'm going to get the prices, and not only the prices, I'm going to get the information about the product that the prices are for. Right? And again, it's fairly straightforward, right? Like I'm just literally just calling list on the prices. And then if you take a look, and I'm like looking under the glare, on 23 and 26, between those two, maybe I should come back here, but then I won't be on the camera.
No, you're fine.
If I look at 23 to 26, you know what I mean, you can notice that I'm specifying some limits. Yeah, that's perfect, actually. Thank you. So I'm saying, hey, I want you to grab at maximum 40 items. I want only the prices that are active. Right? So that means that we can activate or deactivate prices if we wanted to. And then also, I want you to expand it. And I want you to include the actual product data along with the price. So that means that I'm not just getting the price, but I'm getting the product that's attached to the price. One of the good things about doing that and expanding it is it prevents me from having to make two separate API calls. So I don't have to call the price service and then call the product service. I just make one API call. I get the product and the price. Because within Stripe, those are actually two different entities. Just like customers and orders and all these things are different entities. But if I want to get them together, I can do something like this, and I could say, hey, expand it, and include this in the payload that comes back from the server. So again, I get that stuff, and I'm doing a little bit of flattening because, when these prices come back, like there's a lot of stuff in here that I probably don't want. And so I do a little bit of link to flatten the object and only return 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like the 6 properties that I actually need for my front end. And then I'm going to send that back over to my Blazor application. That's going to go ahead and make it look pretty. Okay, So that's that part. Let's talk about the checkout session part. Now, so this is the exciting part. So when we come here, remember I told you whenever we use Stripe Checkout and whenever we click that checkout button, it's going to create a checkout session, right? So what's inside of the session? So in this case, I'm going to make a checkout session request. So every time I click that tickets button, if you remember that tickets button that's on the page, it's going to hit this endpoint, and then it's going to send me the item and the price ID, right? So the price ID, there you go, and then the quantity. The quantity just defaults to 1 because, we just hard-coded it to 1, but you can change it if you wanted to. But again, you can say, hey, tell me the things that I actually want to have in here, right? Then if you look on line 59, you notice it says payment mode is equal to payment. So what are some different things that you can have in here? You can have payment, which just means it's a one-time payment. I can do subscriptions if I want to do recurring payments, if that's the type of thing that we're doing. And then you have other ones like setup. Setup is like, hey, I want to collect your credit card information, but I don't want to charge you yet. I'm going to charge you in the future. So again, thinking about like your payment workflow, imagine like, hey, I'm having you sign up for my service, and to sign up, you need a credit card first. If you ever sign up for a cloud account, right, I think it'd be like, give me your credit card, even though you haven't bought anything yet. But then when you start using stuff, then they already have their credit card on file, and you can start charging them later. Again, just thinking about like how exactly you want to handle those payments, right? Thinking about your payment workflow. Okay. Now, some other cool things that I have in here. If you look at line 60, consent collection. So pretty much this says, hey, are you allowing us to send you emails? Pretty much. It's almost like, hey, do you want to subscribe to our newsletter? Do you want me to send you promotional whatever, right? This is important because, again, remember, Stripe controls the form. So if you want to customize the form, we have to give you like the options to do so. So this is almost like you're coding the cloud. Stripe's not really cloud, but it's kind of like what you're doing, right? Like you're coding the form that when it returns to you, you can have the right fields and things like that you want. Also notice on line 64, I'm able to collect a phone number, right? So again, you can turn these things on and off. You can make the form as simple as complex as you want, right? Line 68, right? I'm collecting addresses. And notice I'm saying allowed countries U.S. So I'm only accepting addresses and payments from the United States, right? So if you try to put in an address that's not from the U.S., it's just not going to work, right? The form is just not going to be able to accept that, right? And there's validations and all these types of things in the form that'll prevent you from doing so. And if we scroll down a little bit and you look at line, what are we at? 73 and 74, that's that success URL and cancel URL that I talked to you about. So all I'm really doing is for cancel, if you say you don't want the product anymore, I'm just sending you back to the default page. But if you did successfully check out, then I can send you to that /success endpoint where it shows you like, hey, thank you for coming to this event, and we'll send you or email you your tickets at some point in the future, right? So there you go. And so this is a checkout session. And then at the end, we'll return the session URL. Because this is a Blazor application, I'm returning the URL as a JSON response, and I'm having Blazor actually refresh the page on the front end. If this was a server-rendered application, because again, Blazor runs in the front end, at least the version of Blazor that I'm using runs in the front end. If this was a server-rendered application, then instead of returning OK, I could just return redirect, if you're familiar with like how .NET MVC things work. And then it'll just redirect you to the right page that you need to be on. But essentially, this is what you need to do to create a session object. Now, to be honest with you, what a lot of folks do, don't do this. I didn't tell you to do this, but you can. A lot of folks just copy this and tweak it, right? Because if you think about it, this pretty much has almost everything you need to create a checkout session, right? The line items, so like what is it that I'm buying, right? Do I want to collect emails? Do I want to collect phone numbers? What are the addresses? And then where do I send my users whenever they've either canceled or whenever the payment was successful? And then there you go, right? Copy, paste code, there we go. I have a checkout form. And all I had to do was write some code, and obviously I had to put some products inside of my Stripe dashboard. I'm going to pause for a second. Are there any questions about that?
Is this project on GitHub?
This is on GitHub, yes. I could show you where it is super quick. Here's another thing about working for Stripe is that I have more than one GitHub account, which can be a little confusing sometimes for folks. So this is at Cecil Phillip -Stripe and not just regular Cecil Phillip. And if you go to Stripe Checkout Events sample, it's here, and it'll walk you through setting everything up with your keys and things of that nature. And then you can actually bootstrap the demo code, the demo data into your application as well if you wanted to. So That's also available there if you wanted to do that. All right. So, like I said, so you've seen how to create the form. Now, one thing that's really important is for you to have the ability to listen to what we call webhooks. Right? Stripe has a lot of webhooks. It's how we do notifications, and we let you know, well, when has stuff actually happened. And so here's an example. I have this webhook handler. And inside of my webhook handler, I'm going to listen for a lot of different types of events. So because we're doing Stripe checkout, I'm going to listen to the session checkout completed. So what does that mean? That means that, one, not only did the user go through the checkout flow, but hopefully when we look at the status and it says complete or paid, then I'm going to hope that that means that the user has finished paying. Because remember, you can go through checkout and have the payment denied, right? Like going to that success URL only means that they successfully completed checkout. That doesn't mean that you successfully collected money. Those are two different things. When you successfully collect money, you're going to get a webhook event that's going to say, okay, the checkout was completed, and then when I look at the status, it's going to say complete, or it's going to say something like paid, and then I know, okay, now I could start kicking off my fulfillment workflow. Right? So that means that when you do fulfillment, what do you think about? You think about, I'm going to decrement the amount of product in inventory. You think I'm going to send emails to whoever I need to send. You just think, hey, I'm going to kick off like my shipping process. Right? All these things can happen not when the session is completed, when it's completed and the status is set to paid or complete. That's when you know there's money in the account and we're good to go with the rest of our workflow. So again, that's an important thing. A lot of folks just listen to the event and then they kick off the workflow, and then they're like, oh, look, I got free stuff. Thank you, right? So again, from a developer perspective, always check the status of the session and not just the event, right? Check the status so you know exactly what's happening. Now, in my case, what I'm doing here for my workflow, I have a couple of different options, right? So in my DI container, I have two messengers. So one uses SendGrid and one uses Twilio. So that means that whenever it's processed, in case I have my customer set up for using phone number, I'm going to get a text message on my phone, or if I have it set up using SendGrid, I'm going to get an email at whatever email I have registered on the account. Right? But obviously, you could use whatever you want to use. But this is just, if you look in the code that's inside of GitHub, you'll see how this is all set up. But this is not important. This has nothing to do with Stripe. This is just an example of what you could do when it's time for you to fulfill your order. Okay? Now, what I want to show you is I want to show you how we can handle some other types of events. So this event here that we're handling is just called checkout session completed. And that's fine, right? And there's also checkout session expired. But another one I want us to look at is this one called checkout session payment succeeded. Now, payment succeeded is only going to execute whenever we have like a deferred payment method. When we think about credit cards are immediate payment method. You know right then and there, is there money or is there not money? Is it going to succeed or is it not? When you use things like bank accounts, and I want to use ACH debits or some of the other deferred payment methods like Canadian bank account and things of that nature, what will happen is that your checkout session would be completed, then it has to go to the bank, and then it might take a day or two before it actually comes back with you and actually says, okay, we've successfully processed, the transfer of money, right? So then what happens? That means that your code should wait until that event is actually fired before you actually fulfill that order, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to log this really quick because, just to make sure to show you that this works and it hits, right? Deferred payment, can't spell. Deferred payment. Is that how you spell deferred? Sure. I'm pretty sure that's how you spell it. Is it mad at me? What is it mad about?
One F and two R's. Oh, my. I bet you Dan.
No. Typo? One F and, you serious? Oh, I guess you're right. See, there you go. I'm a developer. I don't spell for a living. So, there you go. So, what's going to happen now is that this is going to hit, hopefully, this is going to hit this endpoint after we enable like a deferred payment method. I'm going to put in a break here because then it's going to yell at me otherwise. So if I put, I'm going to put a breakpoint here, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to head back to my Stripe account. Now, if I go to settings, and here on the left side where it says payment methods, I can see some of those different payment methods that are available on this account. So, tick, tick, boom. Okay. So if I look at my different payment methods, So as you can see here, credit cards are turned on, Apple Pay and Google Pay are turned on. You could turn them off if you want to, but they're on by default. There's Alipay, there's WeChat Pay. If you're dealing with customers in China, you can turn that on if you want to. Bank redirects. Remember we talked about buy now, pay later. We have those options as well. Turn them on if you want to. I want to use this ACH Direct Debit. I'm going to use this because this is one of those deferred payment methods. So that means that, like, okay, we're gonna get that that payment, but it's going to take a while for us to actually get there. Okay. So now that that's turned on, after we go ahead and check out our account, we should start getting some of that information. But there's one thing I want to do first, right? I should have this saved, but I'm just going to do Stripe test accounts, because this is what we all like to do. We're going to copy stuff. Now, when we come here on this page, you'll be able to see some of the different test cards that are available. So remember I told you, and there's code and stuff in here. So remember I told you earlier that you can come in here and use those test accounts. So earlier you saw me use 42, 42, 42, 42, right? Here you can use Visas, you can use MasterCards, American Express, so on and so forth. As you can see, like, we have all these different cards that you can come in here and you can try out inside of your thing, right? Here we go. We can look at cards by country. You know what I mean? If you wanted to look at any of that type of stuff, Middle East, so on and so forth. Now, what I want to do is I want to get a bank account number. Let's see if I can find that. Let's see, bank. This is not the page of the bank account. This doesn't have the bank account on it. Let's see. Let's see, Stripe, test, bank account. Let's see. Isn't this the page that was just on?
Yes, sir.
Pages, fraud, balance. Somewhere on here has bank accounts. I noticed because I was on here today. Those are cards. Yeah, these are all cards. Yeah, see, if you wanted to do a card that has, like, declined payments, you could use these cards as well to try out that workflow. Here are credit cards that, you know, if you want to kick off fraud detection, right? This is blocked, high risk, elevated, elevated risk, invalid data, disputes. Disputes are like saying, hey, you know, disputes or refunds, if you want to kick out those workflows. Where are the bank accounts? I know there's test bank accounts in here. Rate limits.
None.
Okay, here we go. There we go. There we go. All right. So let's look for. No, this is not what I want. No, that's not what I want. Where are the bank accounts?
I think you were there. Wasn't there?
No, but this doesn't have the United States in here. We have more.
Show us Canada.
This is separate direct payment. Let me see. ACH. Where are the bank accounts? There's supposed to be bank accounts in here. All right, let's do this. This is probably my fault. I'm going to use Google, and not Bing. So, Stripe test bank routing number. Sure, maybe that's how it. It keeps sending me to the same place, but I don't see it anywhere. Why is it not in here? Account boundaries. Where are these bank accounts? Refused. Anyway, let's just pretend that the bank account was there. So if you wanted to actually try this out, I'll find a link and I'll send it to you all later. But if you actually wanted to try it out, if I come back in and I rerun my code now, what should happen is that at some point you should be able to see, if I click on, I'm just going to click on a random thing. Notice now on the form, I not only have card, but I have the ability to select U.S. bank account, right? Oh, this is why it's not here. I remember now. Okay, so you can click the U.S. bank account, and notice here at the bottom, because we're in test mode, it has test institution here. So now if I click the test institution, this is why it wasn't in the docs, because they moved and they put it here, right? Now what this is going to do is going to connect to like a fake bank account. Again, we're in test mode. Notice it says test data. This is not a real thing. Test mode. And then now you can see the different types of test accounts. So you can see, was the account closed? Was it a failure? Insufficient funds? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And, you know, I'm going to go ahead and say this is successful. I'm going to say done. Okay, great. And then all I have to do is, well, I have to fill out the form, obviously. Email, don't email me. My name is Cecil, and I work at, I keep hoping that this is going to work. So usually what happens when I'm at home, I don't know what's not happening here. Usually what happens is that when you start typing out autocomplete, the address, and then it'll just kind of just show up for you. For some reason it's not working here, but that's fine. I'm just going to do, what did I put the last time? One Microsoft Way. Seattle, WA 33322. I just put in like a fake thing. See, yeah, I don't know. It's acting real wonky today. It usually doesn't do that. But anyway, one Microsoft Way. Seattle 33322. Sure. Fill that out. Sure. And we have the bank account. Still not. Wait a minute. Of course, that's a valid number. There we go. Valid number. Now I can pay. And then, again, we're just going to get processed because it gets sent back to our success page, and you can kind of go through it. So again, you could use credit cards. You can use bank accounts. We could use Google Pay, Apple Pay. You can use deferred payments. All these different things you can use. And all you have to do is just create that checkout session. And then inside of the dashboard, you can kind of go ahead and start configuring some of those different events. Now, a couple other things that I do want to show you really quickly. So if we take a look at our dashboard, so super quick, if I click on products, let's say I click on the Sundance product. Now, you might notice that it has this price here. Notice it's a default price. Now, if I wanted to service markets from different countries, I might want to be able to add different prices for the same product. Okay? And when you think about a Stripe product represents an instance of a SKU of an item, right? So let's say I'm selling like Boca code T-shirts, right? This will be the Boca code red T-shirt, right? Very specific SKU. And if you have like a blue T-shirt or a black T-shirt, like those different variations, those all represent different products, right? Because you might have a day when you say, okay, all the red T-shirts are $4 versus the other ones that are $6, right? I don't want to have to go in and like, how are you going to do that unless they're all different SKUs? You see what I'm saying? So like a product represents a SKU or a particular instance of like a particular item. So now let's say I wanted to create another price for this particular instance. I can come in here. I can select something like standard pricing. I can give it a number. So notice here's all the different currencies and whatnot we support. I can select euros. How much is this now? $100 and something. Let's say this is $200 euros. One-time payments, because I'm not going to be charging you for the event all the time. And then I could just say add price, right? And now I have a second price whenever I'm using this product. So now if I was in a European country, we're not, but if we were, instead they'll get that price and not the US price because again, it's locale where it'll be able to adapt and change to some of those systems, which is really cool. Another thing that might be important to you, because this is not your database, but you may want to query it, you can add additional metadata to your product. So pretty much like any Stripe object, customers, payments, products, prices, all have this metadata option. This is a key value here. It's a dictionary, right? You can just throw stuff in there, and you have the ability to store additional information that will give you context about the thing that you're working on, right? So that's there as well. Okay. Now, one last thing I want to show you really quickly that I think is really cool. So let's say I don't have this backend. Let's say I didn't write any C# code at all, but I have Stripe, I have products in Stripe, and I have a price bid. Now, what if I wanted to be able to just create a really quick link straight to checkout without having to do any of that other integration? And so we have a thing called payment links. If you look at that right above my head right here, it says payment links right next to that price. And what this is our no-code option for you to start accepting payments. So you can imagine it's summer and your kids want to sell cookies outside, or I don't know, you have someone that cuts your grass and he doesn't have a website. Instead of having them like handle money, essentially you can create like a little QR code or whatever the case is, and you can give them a link, and that link will take them directly to that checkout page. So let me show you what this looks like. I'm just going to click on this. I'm going to click on create. What's that? Oh, yeah. I'm going to grab this in a second. right? And now, instead of me customizing with code, I'm going to customize it here in the dashboard, right? So I could do things like I want to collect the address. I'm going to require, I require you to provide my phone number. But you notice as I'm changing these things, the form is changing there on the right side, right? You have advanced options. We can look at, do we want to have coupon codes? Sure, we can add coupon codes if you want to. You want to save the customer's details for later? This is helpful in case, like, they've signed in with Stripe already and they've checked in. Instead of them coming in and filling out this form, they can just say, hey, use my information that you already have, right? And they can just reuse that payment information. This is a quicker workflow for your customer. So again, we can click the things and we can make this happen. And now we're going to have this form. What account am I going to use? I don't have an account. I don't need an account. That's fine. And now I just want to create a payment link. Oh, it's mad at me. It's not letting me create it. Why won't you let me create it? Oh, there you go. Let me uncheck that. That's not important. So now I have this payment link, right? So now, copy this. If I was supposed to go into some other browser, let me open Firefox. Right? I haven't opened Firefox for today. I've opened Chrome. I've opened Safari. Let's open Firefox. I'm not signed into Firefox just to show you how this works. Oh, 100 thank yous. Thank you so much.
Oh, wow.
So I'm in Firefox now. I'm going to paste in that payment link. If you take a look at it, buy.stripe.com. It's a test account, so obviously it says test. And then it gives you the ID for that thing that we're going to. And again, as I'm expecting, it's going to send me to that payment link for this particular product. And again, I can accept bank accounts, cards, and all of this stuff. And I didn't have to write any code. All I had to do was create the product in Stripe and say create payment link. And now we have a link that we could, we could share with folks. You can email them to people. You could text message it to people if you wanted to. And you didn't have to write any code to make this part of it happen. So again, this is just one of the reasons why checkout is a really easy integration for folks, and it's a great place to start. You have control as much as you can customize within the dashboard. If you wanted more full control, I showed you there was the payment elements option. But for this, I think this is a great option for you to just get started really quickly. Again, if you wanted to give your kids an allowance or chores or whatever the case is, right? You can kind of create a little payment link for them, and then they can be like, hey, Daddy, you got to pay me, for taking out the trash or the dishes or whatever the case is, right? You can start creating these experiences, not just for your business, but for your families and things of that nature.
I like the QR code that you have there.
Yeah, you can use the QR code if you wanted to. You know what I mean? Let me see. What happens if I paste it here? Yeah, you'd have to put that in. You have to create your own QR code, which I thought we generated it for you, but we don't.
It looks like it.
We don't actually generate it for you, but that's fine.
We use this for the sponsors for some of the events we do, and for my wife's different products.
Right. So there you go. So there you have a few different options of how you could work with Stripe. Let's head back over to these slides really quickly. And all right, so let's talk about developer resources. So a couple of things that I didn't show, but we can definitely come back and talk about at some point. We have a few different options of how you can work with Stripe. Now, I just, was just running Writer and .NET and things of that nature, but we also have the Stripe CLI. One of the cool things about using the Stripe CLI, particularly when you're working with webhooks. Now, webhooks from Stripe on the internet is not going to know about localhost stuff running on your machine. So how can I forward those events from Stripe in the cloud to us running on my machine? Now, you could use things like ngrok or Tunnel or any of those different options. But if you have the Stripe CLI, you can just do it yourself. You can just say Stripe listen. You can actually give it the URL you wanted to forward the events to, and it'll just send it straight down to your server. You also have the ability to do Stripe trigger. So that means that, hey, maybe I don't want to actually click all the buttons and go through the workflow, but I just want to trigger a fake event. Like what happens when I trigger a payment failure, or what happens when there's a payment success, or what happens if there's a customer created. Let's trigger those events locally on our machine, and we can try out that integration using the Stripe CLI. There you go. This one is triggering a payment intent succeeded. That just means that some money got paid, right?
I've never seen any company.
Yeah, it's really cool. So again, you can have your local events. You don't have to be in the cloud to test them, and now you can kind of see what your integration looks like before you deploy it to the cloud. So that's the Stripe CLI.
You can only trigger test events, or you can trigger real.
You can only trigger test events.
Okay.
These are only test events. These are only test events. Yeah. These are only going to be in test mode.
Okay.
There's other things you can do, for instance, you could look at the logs. These are going to be the real logs, not just test logs. You can look at the logs. You can actually create customers and products and even payment links like I showed you using the CLI. Anything you can do with the Stripe API, you can do with the CLI. Like there's a verb, a resource verb, that nomenclature. So you can say Stripe accounts create, or you can say Stripe payment links create, or Stripe product create, or Stripe product list. You can kind of go through some of those, that similar vocabulary and start working with the CLI. Another thing that my team actually works on, that's a little polarizing, isn't it? Like, it was dark and I know it's like super bright. We maintain a Postman Collection, if folks are familiar with Postman. If you have a Postman account and you go to their, I don't know what you call it, but you go into their gallery and you search for Stripe, our team maintains an API collection where you can look at all the various Stripe APIs inside of Postman, and obviously you need the copy of your Stripe keys. And then you can start using the API in like just raw HTTP, no client SDKs or anything like that, in case you wanted to see exactly how that stuff works. Another thing we have is the Escort Extension too. Maybe we will have some more extensions for some other IDEs, maybe not. We'll see what happens. But we do have this. Essentially, this is really just like a front end for the Stripe CLI, to be honest with you. So again, you can look at your logs, you can trigger events. You can even download samples, which is great. So what this will do is it'll go out to our GitHub repo, and you can select the programming language you want for the front end and the back end. It'll pull down the sample, and it'll load it up inside of Visual Studio Code for you, which is great. So that makes it a lot easier for you to get started with just doing stuff. Again, if you want to learn a little bit more about Stripe, my team maintains, like I said, the Postman Collection, but we also have the Stripe Developers YouTube channel where there's like live streaming and videos and interviews and like all kinds of DevRel stuff.
We get to see the great system.
So I'm on there. I have a show that I do on there randomly, as well as my other teammates and customers and all kinds of cool folks that are doing stuff in the world of Stripe. But I think that's about it. At least that's as much as I wanted to cover today. Is there any questions? Is there anything anyone wants to know or ask about? Or
I know you mentioned that the program of yours is what kind of browser you're using. Like, if you're using a Google browser, it's suggested it's like Google Pay, or if it's Microsoft,
so I think if it's Apple, it goes to Safari. I think I know I have other browsers on here. So for instance, if I open Edge, let's run the application and see what happens when we run it in Edge. I think this is a local.
There is a thing called user agent. You could just say if user agent is Safari, user agent is.
Where is this?
Oh, you're giving away the secret.
Is this running?
Yes. Was that your question? Or?
This is running, right?
And it also detects what kind of device you're using. Like, I'm using a Samsung device, and service I use is Samsung.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. So you can detect devices. I don't know if it'll detect